Today, we are actually going to talk about how to trace sources. So first of all, we'll go over some basic concepts. Then we are going to talk about 3 important habits that we all should develop. And then I'm going to give you some extra tips and tactics for digital investigations, particularly on source. The last thing we'll touch on is automation. So, all your questions about whether there's an inauthentic coordinated campaign or bots behind some tweets. So we'll touch on that in the last section. This is me, I'm Esther Chan, First Draft APAC Bureau Editor, and I'm based in Sydney. So let's get into it. Here are the 5 pillars of verification. So you can think about it as 5 elements that make your verification solid. So like 5 things to check out. So today our focus is on source. And I just want to highlight the importance of provenance.
同时的话，我也强调一下出处的重要性。
Yes, I don't know if you guys can hear the interpretation, but I can, and I just want to make sure it's not all mixed up. Sorry.
Just try that now. I think it should be okay. No. Okay, just try again one more time, Esther. Otherwise, we might just have to lose the interpretation for today.
All right. Cool. So obviously today we're talking about source, but then I just want to highlight again the importance of provenance, which means we are looking at the original piece of content, right? Because it's kind of pointless to look at the source and date and location when you're actually not looking at the original piece of content. So when it comes to source, we want to make sure that the person that we're trying to identify is the person who created the piece of content. So like took the photo or filmed the video or wrote the piece of content, right? And that may not be the same sometimes as the person who uploaded the content. So it's really important for us to get to the bottom of it and find out who really is the source. There are 5 questions you can ask about sources. First of all, who uploaded it? And then, is it possible that they uploaded this content but did not create it? Then in that case, they're not the source. Look at other content they uploaded in the past. What does it tell you about the account? So being observant about the kind of content that the person usually posts. Does it make sense that the person who holds the account is where they say they are? So for example, if it's an account that geotagged a lot of posts to, say, Jakarta, then all of a sudden there's a video of flooding in Germany. You wonder whether the person traveled there or simply reposted something that they saw online, right? So we're also thinking about the other pillars of verification, like date, location, things like that. Also, we want to think about whether we can find contact information for the person, because the best way to verify a source is always by contacting them directly. And this is speaking from experience as well, because in the past, I would have to contact online sources a lot. And usually when you talk to the person, it's far less likely for them to lie to you because they don't have the time to make up the lie, right? Also, these days, digital verification can become very tech heavy. A lot of the attention would go to, say, image analysis, comparing satellite imagery, so people can dig really deep just using free online tools. But in the end of the day, we have to remember there are actually 3 things that we should always try to stick to when it comes to source verification. So the first one is always do a reverse image search. It wouldn't take you too much time, but then it can help you confirm or dismiss provenance, so whether it's original. And if you find out something that you see on the internet, it was posted like 5 years ago, then it's probably being shared out of context right now, right? Here's an example. So this reporter for The Intercept, he sent a message to quite a well-known anti-vaccine conspiracy theorist in the US, Dr. Naomi Wolf. He sent her a photo of someone, this guy here, who looks like a doctor, with this outfit. And the quote says, "If a vaccine is effective, then why do you need to pressure people to take it? Informed consent means letting patients make their own choices." And Dr. John Sims, MD. So what happened was Naomi Wolf took the bait and she posted the image on her Twitter. But the truth is, this is actually a picture of Johnny Sims, who is a famous pornographic actor, apparently. So Naomi Wolf could have avoided the embarrassment if she had done a reverse image search, right? This is not a real doctor. The second route to live by is to look for primary sources. Sometimes when people are doing verification and digital investigations, they forget the standards of verifying something on the internet should be the same as those for any other kinds of journalism, right? Like print or broadcast. The closer you can get to a primary source of information, the more solid your verification is going to be. So here's an example of a Dr. Gordon Peterson, who has been promoting his books on Amazon and other materials. So he argued that sulfur is a powerful medical treatment. And then when COVID hit, he started to say that sulfur can cure COVID as well. And if you look at his LinkedIn here, he says that he has a PhD and multiple medical degrees. So the LinkedIn profile picture shows someone who dresses like a physician and who is supposed to live in Pleasant Grove, which is a city in Utah. But bear in mind, LinkedIn is not a primary source of information. So anyone can say anything they want about themselves, their professional background, and education. So to try to get to a primary source, we can look up Utah's licensee and verification system, where they have information about professional licenses, right? For physicians, for accountants, etc. And just putting his name in there, we couldn't find any licensed physician in the state under the same name. So this just shows that with a quick search, with the official source, shows that this person is not a licensed physician in Utah and probably not even a physician at all. Here's another example. So recently there was a scam doing the rounds in the UK, trying to get people to confirm their current vaccination status through a site that looks exactly the same as the NHS site. But if you go to the NHS site here, which is a primary source, you can easily compare and see that there are differences. The other thing that you can do is to hover your mouse over to the links and see if you can get a preview like this. When you do that on the scam website, it says that it will direct you to a website, swartentra.com, which is not the NHS URL. Here's a third example. So one thing that has been circulating a lot in some Spanish-speaking closed messaging groups, like on Telegram, WhatsApp, are some claims that used data from the CDC, but out of context. So if you go straight to the source, the CDC says this system called Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, it contains information on unverified reports of adverse events, and that reports are accepted from anyone. So basically the CDC has this database where anyone can put in a report of some kind of bad reaction to a vaccine, but it's unverified and anyone can write something in there, which means none of the articles or data in there should be used as evidence about a vaccine, right? Here you go. And ultimately, even if our focus may be on digital verification, we don't actually have to limit our reporting and investigation online. You can always pick up the phone and go after the primary source and talk to someone. And next, we have some tips for digital investigations. So as with any verification project, a big part of investigating sources is being observant and knowing what clues to look for that can help you lead you to other information. For example, when we look at this Twitter account, we notice that the handle is Luke Moore and then a bunch of numbers. And the username is zinc and vitamin D, COVID-19 game changers. So the things that we should take note of are, first of all, the handle. It's not always, but sometimes one of the signs of an inauthentic Twitter account is a bunch of random numbers in the handle. So it could be a flag that this person is concealing their identity. So what you can do, you can copy and paste the handle into Google and try to find other accounts that might be using the same handle. Also, we can run a reverse image search to see where the profile photo came from. And it took only like a second, and then we found out that the photo is one of a model and it was used in magazines before. So the photo could well be taken from the internet and probably doesn't show the real Twitter user unless it's actually the model tweeting about, COVID and vitamin D. Also, we should check the credentials they claim they have. So this guy says he's a data scientist with a PhD in prognostication. And you can see if they have a professional profile, or maybe you can find a primary source for that, right? Usually, if someone is a data scientist, they'll be working with like a university or institution. You would be able to find a professional profile. Another thing that you can take note of is the date. When did the account join the platform, right? So if an account joined the platform in the immediate aftermath of like a breaking news event, then it could be an indication that the account has some sort of agenda or motive, or maybe not. I mean, it could just be coincidence, but it's something to pay attention to. And finally, we want to take a look at the content that they post and pay close attention to the language. So do they sometimes post in a way that doesn't really make sense? The language is a little bit jumbled, or maybe sometimes the punctuation is a bit odd. Those could be signs of automation. And next up, we have Twittonomy. So this is a great free tool for a quick snapshot of a Twitter account. And it gives you these stats that can be useful to help you understand whether something is automated, like how many tweets a day, the percentage of retweets. When we take a look at this account, we see that there are not many original tweets from this account, but the percentage of retweets is very high, over 85%. So if we want to check whether something is automated, there are actually many different indicators we can consider. For example, what does the tweet history look like over time? What is their average tweet count per day? What percentage of their tweets are retweeted? And which users do they retweet the most? Who do they reply to the most? What are their most used hashtags? We can look at their popular tweets. Also, when do they tweet? The last one is quite interesting because when you think about it, most people who are real humans, they will have to sleep, right? So you will always see a gap in no matter how keen they're on Twitter, you will always see a gap when they're not tweeting because they're sleeping. But then automated accounts don't need to sleep, so they could be tweeting around the clock. And next up, how do we investigate websites? I find that we often focus on social media and sometimes we overlook websites. And if you're investigating a suspicious site, one of the things that you can do is to look at the registration information. So every website is registered, but increasingly, a lot of people are paying to protect their website. So a lot of that information is shielded from the public. And sometimes if you can still find some information because there are many websites that help you look up registration information. And one of those that we use quite a lot is this one called viewNDS.info. It's pretty handy. When it comes to domains, we want to look for suspicious URL endings. We want to investigate registration information. Also, one more thing that you can do is to try to find other versions of the website online. And we have seen actually many cases of websites that move onto a different URL, and then they would try to privacy protect the new website, but they may not do that for the old website, right? So if you can find a different version of the website, which is older, and then you check the registration information of the older website, then you can potentially get more information about, when it was registered, in what location, or even the company that registered the website. Also, you can try to use a reverse IP search to look for other websites hosted on the same server. So this is quite helpful because when you do this, you can look at other websites that are hosted on the same server, but then you have to be really careful because sometimes, even if they're on the same server, it doesn't mean that they're connected to each other. But sometimes they are. And then sometimes you can find networks of sites that are related by doing reverse IP searches. And if you don't know how to do that, you can once again use this website, dns.info. It has a handy reverse IP lookup, and you just plug in the URL and it does that for you. So here's an example of a URL to investigate. So we've got this website, Tierra Pura. It's a Spanish language website that popped up at the beginning of the pandemic. So the website has a lot of anti-vaccine content, such as this one. And the headline says, vaccinated people have been tested positive for COVID. So how is it that the benefits of experimental vaccines outweigh the risks? So we wanted to check out the URL, and we put that in the search bar of viewdns.info. And as expected, a lot of the information about a site's registration is blocked. But we can see that it's registered with APAC. And what's APAC? It's actually the same server known for hosting sites like Parler, 8chan, and Gap. So this APAC actually hosts a lot of sites that have migrated there after other servers refuse to continue hosting them, because of various reasons. They don't want to be associated with those sites. So this is quite interesting. The other thing that's interesting about this is that you can see the creation date of the website, March 31st, 2020. So that's also at the beginning of the pandemic. The last section is about understanding automation, because some people are really fascinated about the idea of bots. But we have to remember that while authentic accounts and content are for sure a problem, they are not necessarily the most important part of our investigation, right? Because there are many people who are actually humans, but they will show like bot-like behavior or automated behavior. But in the end, they're not automated, they're real people. It's just somehow they work in a way that are almost like bots. So some of these people who run these accounts are actually paid to spread misinformation. They would do that on different social media accounts, and they may have like a formula to follow. So sometimes they would come across as really robotic, but they're actually humans. And other people are just keen supporters of a policy or candidate. So they're like tweeting a lot or, saying the same thing over and over again, just because they're really enthusiastic about the topic. And if you really want to figure out whether something like an account or a piece of content is automated or not, there are a lot of different signs to look for. We should also, so here's a checklist, right? There are many different signs about automated account, but then we should look for multiple signs and not just one, because just to say an account is tweeting like 100 times a day, it's not good enough a piece of evidence to conclude that someone is a bot. Because again, a lot of people do that. They live on Twitter, and tweeting a lot of times a day is not unusual. So we want to have at least like multiple signs from this checklist to even consider maybe the account is automated. So some of the things that we can look at is, again, when was the account created? Was it immediately after a breaking news event, or say at the beginning of the pandemic? A lack of personal information, maybe a stolen profile photo, that's pretty suspicious. Also, if an account is spamming a particular hashtag, that's a good sign as well. So, but again, we have to think about, we have to have a number of these items to even consider whether it's an automated account, and not just pick one of these and say, oh, this account is not real, not genuine, because that would be that would not be a good conclusion for our research.